Well, here we go again, kicking off another week in the workshop. Yesterday we got up to a whole heap of small jobs, odds and ends. Some fitted the carby to an old F350, did a cylinder head repair on a 56 Chevy. Guy was having some issues with some threads, so I had to do some machining and some tapping and things like that. But really we're only sort of getting to the point where I could start laying out some parts on Tom's race car and pick up sort of where I left off on that. So we're going to be building power steering pump brackets today for that car, and really just sort of try and get the brain around where I was up to when that sort of got parked up for way too long as all these other jobs escalated as they tend to do here. So we'll do some fabrication today, some template making, and see how all that sort of pans out. We'll set up a time lapse as we're doing some work on that. Also got the VK, my own VK, back in the workshop. We're sort of waiting for a bit of a break in the weather. It's been pouring here. This thing really only probably needs like a solid 8-hour day put into it, and it can go to rego. But you know what it's like when you get to the end of the project. There's just all these, you know, little 1% things to make it spot on. But when I put that up on the hoist this morning and just sort of put some plastic on it to, you know, keep the dust off in the workshop, as I was sort of walking around it, you know, like this thing has come up pretty good really, albeit a couple of issues with where it was painted that we'll have to correct once our booth's installed. Other than that, you know, this thing's an absolute weapon of a car. Probably one of my favourite parts on this car is just how well everything was finished off. You know, working with our auto electrician James, you know, he did an amazing job on the wiring, and I put just untold amounts of hours into rebuilding and reconditioning, restoring, you know, custom exhausts, all done in 316 stainless, fully TIG welded. Just, you know, everything's as neat as. Brand new tail shafts, rebuilt diffs, rebuilt engine, you know, bigger brakes, pretty much just everything that they should have done in the factory in 1985, I guess. But who would have thought that, you know, a 1985 Commodore would have been considered a classic. So we got, as you saw in the last video, we got all the underside of the Monaro all wrapped it out. So that's ready to start putting the diff and everything back in and getting it back into a roller. I'm not sure if I'd actually shown this in previous videos, but there was a huge dent in the rear beaver panel here. So last night before I went home, I just did a whole heap of dent pulling on that and bashing and crashing, and it's still got a fair way to go, but considering that was punched in about 3 inches, we've managed to get most of that out, and it's starting to look pretty good. So we'll be able to save that without having to cut it all out. But anyway, it's race cars today, so we're into it. Alright, we're a couple of hours in, so started off on the lathe machining up some spacers to set the bracket for the power steering pump off the back of the cylinder head. So then we moved on and got some heavy plate, notched out a cardboard template to come up with the stud pattern to bolt to the cylinder head, so we'll check that out. So that's our heavy plate there that's going to bolt to the cylinder head. This is our big power steering pump that we've got to mount extremely strongly. So we'll just go upstairs, grab some hardware and get that plate bolted onto the cylinder head. So it's got a bolt onto that face of the cylinder head and be far enough away from all of our pipe spaghetti so that it doesn't cook the belt. Well, this bracket's turned out pretty good. Just had a bit of a feed and back into welding up the spacers onto the back side. Check it out. So that's what we've managed to shape it up to, get it to go to Jenny Craig and lose a bit of weight. So just welded those spacers on the back side to stop them sort of falling off while you're working on the car. We'll wait for that to cool and we'll bolt it up and have a bit of a look at the next step. Alright, so here's what we came up with the power steering bracket. So we've got dual idlers to make sure the belt wrap is spot on, plus that'll keep that away from any heat sources. We've got that pump in double shear as well. And that should all line up nice and true. So we'll bolt her on and see how we went. So continuing on with the Pro Buggy on the next day, sort of middle of the day now. Last night when I finished up, I sort of knew that potentially I may have had to just rework one pipe on that header system, which to me is just no big deal, because like, if you can imagine, I made that whole 8-into-1 exhaust before, you know, the customer had actually bought a pulley or a hub for the power steering pump. So considering that all I've got to do is quickly modify one pipe, and not only that, I reckon I could have easily got away with it. There was absolutely enough air gap there to run it, because the belt was nowhere near it. The belt was a good probably 3 inches away from it. However, the pulley was probably about 1.5 inches away from it. So I didn't want radiant heat affecting the bearing, you know, or the pulley sort of transferring heat into the belt. So just to give it a bit more service life and just to absolutely make sure, gave that a bit of a retweak there this morning. So we'll have a little look at that now. And then the 10mm bracket that I made yesterday is absolutely, you know, strong as, but if you're really reef on it, you can get a little bit of flex out of it. So I just want to put a spine on the back of that bracket now and make sure that that is like absolutely rock solid, because when the power steering system on these cars goes to full lock and you know, triggers off the relief valve, there is actually a fair bit of load on that belt. So put a bit of a spine on that now, and then I think the next thing that we'll be onto after that is probably the power steering reservoir, possibly some lines, but I want to keep on the fabrication side of things. And you know, the other side of it with this exhaust is, you know, we get comments from people that really just don't know anything about anything, you know, let alone the fact of you know, the science and the length of the tubes and everything that went into, you know, building this exhaust system. You know, they're stepped headers at a certain length, you know, the secondary is a certain length for a reason, you know, the collector's a certain size, the muffler's a certain size. It's all for a reason. Like, it's not just, oh yeah, you know, this is how it turned out. So you know, typical internet clowns, you know, whatever, just have no idea. But the fact that this is, you know, not only 8-into-1 but in firing order, anyone who knows what that cyclonic effect is about and what we're trying to achieve out of a naturally aspirated engine. But yeah, I get so sick of the internet warriors, it's not even funny. Like, if you've got a criticism or whatever, come to the shop, let's discuss it, see how it works out. Anyway, so that pipe there was inboard here quite a way. And you know, it's one of those things, I don't really know why I did it like that initially, but hindsight's always 20/20. So now I can get these long bolts in and out of the idler pulleys, so you can change idler pulleys, you know, without having to worry about pulling anything apart. Probably the big thing that you can't see is that this belt wraps around under that and then goes underneath the water pump. So, you know, people that think it's close, you look at
you can't see it on the camera, but there is probably 5 to 6 inches of air gap between those pulleys and that collector. So it's just not even remotely an issue. But I guess when you're copping rocks in the face from this car, you might realise that, you know, maybe we knew what we were doing. So just got the whole lot bolted back on, and I couldn't be happier with the way that all worked out. So everything lines up dead nuts. We got the idler pulleys on there to get the belt wrap correct. We've got the pump in double shear. We've got the sides of the bracket all wrapped. And that is as solid as. Perfect. So she's the Arvo. What I usually get up to before I go home is try and do a couple hours on something for myself. Just keep the Monaro project moving along a little bit. So the parcel shelf on this car was absolutely destroyed, which honestly I thought was you know, the big part of the rust, but we found a hell of a lot more as we stripped it. But anyway, we're nearly through the rust repairs. So we had a shell back in South Australia from one that I actually crashed when I was about, no, I don't know, maybe around 21 years old, I suppose. And that shell sat out in a paddock back home for nearly 3 decades, and there's still no rust in it. So a good mate of mine back there, Mark, chopped out a big section for me, and I've just got that all prepped, ready to weld in tomorrow night. So that's the underside of the rear section that I needed. It's got the boot lip and rear window lip in that. So that was wire wheeled, back to bare steel, rust converted, and then a big double coat of copper spray. And then over on the shell, where we've had that opened up, that's all been rust converted inside, and then that's got a coat of KBS coatings to keep all that sealed up in there. And I think once we go through and do that, that'll take care of that. So I've still got to make this corner lip here is a little bit gone, so I'll cut that out and make that little piece and the top piece and weld that in. But the rear beaver repair turned out really, really good. I managed to pull most of that out and get the boot sort of back into shape. And then, yeah, as I showed earlier on, cut that section out and made a new one. I have to excuse my voice, I've got a bit of a cold at the moment. So anyway, that's going to wrap up today. Might pull the doors and try and head off on time. G'day again. Week's disappeared, flat out as usual. Yesterday, Saturday, was pretty hectic working with Tyler. He got all the inside of the Monaro all brushed out with KBS coating, so that floor and firewall section all has a really good seal on it now. Excuse the voice, still got a bit of a flu, but we're pushing through. So Sunday, don't often sort of push through into Sundays, but yesterday I made a heap of progress on the Chevy truck. Got both big fuel tanks all built and got one side all strapped in. So you're going to push on and get the straps made for the right hand side. and then keep on going and hopefully make up a couple of little pickups to go in the bottom of the fuel tanks. Speaking to a good mate of mine yesterday, he's a diesel mechanic, and he sort of suggested that we might come up off the bottom of the tank a little bit, just to allow for any, dirty fuel or settlement, because we're intending on travelling, Australia wide in this thing, hopefully for many, many years to come. So he thought that might be a good idea. I agreed. So put some -16 inserts in the bottom of the fuel tanks to allow a heap of room for me to design a pickup and use probably a stainless steel bung, some tube, and we'll make some little pickups out of those, but we'll show you those sort of as they happen. Well, let's have a look at the fuel tanks. So they're the fuel tanks that I built yesterday. Got dual on both sides. Probably the mounting brackets that have been hanging off the chassis for a while probably make a fair bit more sense now. I'm really happy with the way they worked out. I sort of had this pictured in my mind right from the start. I wanted like a fairly clean sort of strap look around the outside. Probably the only thing I could have done in hindsight better was this mount. I probably could have finished that about here and taken the strap around further, and it probably just would have given it a cleaner look across the top. But honestly, I don't mind that sort of industrial look on the top side there. I think it'll fit in sort of well with the rest of the truck once it's all together. I haven't quite worked out whether to paint or polish those tanks, but I made by hand the end discs for these tanks, but then when we got them back from being rolled, they were a little bit bigger in diameter than what initially was planned for, so it just upset the end caps like a little bit, and I didn't get a really nice weld on one. So I managed to weld one end in, and I just wasn't happy with it at all. So we made new end caps and chopped that end cap out that I had already welded in there, which was a real pain in the ass, to be honest, to cut that out of there. But I'm really happy now because the fit up was really, really good. So we got a very nice TIG weld around sort of the outside. We've got a nice curved edge off the bead roller into the tank. So, they really do look like a set of truck tanks, and that's exactly what I was going for. So we use Speedflow 2-inch weld-ons. Obviously, we're Speedflow dealers, so why not? I've got a little -6 welded in here for a breather. And everything's working out really good. So the plan is today to make up 2 tank straps, and I might even get into making up the curved corners for the sleeper cab, because I do have the aluminium here and the glue that I needed to make those. I'm just going to make the corners out of 1mm aluminium, so I can roll it around the frame really easily, because it's actually taller than my sheet metal roller. So I have no way of rolling them sort of without outsourcing the rolling, and generally when I outsource something, something always goes wrong somewhere with it. Not with everybody. We've got some excellent engine machinists and tuners and people that we work with, but I just find do it here and then it'll be good. Anyway, enough chit chat. It's Sunday, so we don't want to be here all day. Let's get something done and we'll bring you along. Still got the roller set up from yesterday, so that should be a pretty easy task to get this in and rolled. So we've just got to work out which way we want it to curl. We should be able to, hopefully, we can just bang that in there and get it started. No, we're going to have to back that off a bit to get it going. Alright, we got that starting to go now, so just work it back and forth until we get the arc that we want. Anyway, that's boring as batshit, so I'll get that done. So we got that rolled and just sitting over the tank. So pretty much what I've done is put a mark where the bracket actually sits. Then I come back about 30 mil. That's going to create our fold line. And then 30 back 65 mil gives us our kick up for our bolt to go through the bracket. And then we gusset the sides in and everything's cool. Alright, so they got our tank straps rolled, made, folded, welded, drilled, ready to rock and roll, but they're pretty hot at the moment, so might go over and have a bit of a look at what we've got to do to make up the corners of the sleeper cab. I've already made all the doors and everything, so we make the corners, then the last piece of the puzzle. Talk about saving the hardest part till last, but I've got to make a nice curved top for that sleeper cab, you know, sort of like the top of a Kenworth low-line bunk. That's going to be the objective, except what I would like to do, and I got no idea whether I can do it because I've never done anything like this, but let's have a look. So you see, I'll try and get it in the right light. Yeah, that's got it. So you see in the roof of the Chevy truck how it's got that body line that comes into the center of the roof and comes down the cowl, and then that follows into the bonnet spear in the hood. What I would really like to do is have that line appear in the front of the sleeper, because I'd like the sleeper to be probably, I don't know, probably maybe like 5 inches taller than what the cab is, I suppose, like just a bit of a gentle step up. So yeah, my idea is to wrap the top of that sleeper. I'll do an MDF base, then build a box around that, fill it full of expander foam, and do a whole heap of shaping to create a mold. Well, that's the plan, but I've never done any work like that before. But I've got a cousin back home that used to do all our race car stuff. Actually, I shouldn't say used to, still does. So I can lean on him fairly well, because he has a massive heap of knowledge on composites and fiberglass and carbon fiber work and all that kind of stuff. And there's also another guy, Chris, over here that hopefully I can lean on to get the actual final piece made. Haven't actually hit him up yet, but it's coming, Chris. So I've just wrapped the corner of that sleeper cab with some masking tape, because that's got a big curve. And I'm just going to put the speed square on here, then come down with a razor blade and cut the masking tape there, and then do the same with a 50mm overlap down here, and then we can lay that tape out on the sheet, knowing that it should have a beautiful wrap around the corner and give us our 50mm overlap on the frame there, and our 50mm overlap on the frame here, and that way we've got a nice rivet line straight into the steel frame of the sleeper cab. So I think that's going to work really well. So hopefully that'll peel off. I'll put 3 layers of tape on there. Yep, there we go. Come on, break off. Hey, there we go. Alright, well that bit of tape just become our ruler. So now I can get a sheet out, lay that down and chop them off in the guillotine. So with our tape laid out flat on the bench, we're coming in at 432 mil. So that is what we have to mark the sheet at to cut up the long side. And I'll just go and see actually how tall that sleeper is now, because we might cut that across first so it's a little bit easier to handle. Let's have a look. Tape measure. You know, tape measures are the worst things to find in a fabrication workshop. I don't know how many I own, but it ain't enough. What have we got going on here? So, how tall did I make this? 1386, 1385. Sounds like a better number. 1385. I better write that down. Otherwise my forgetful brain will change it into something it ain't. So, 1385. That was right, wasn't it? Tall. And what was that? 432. 432. Alright, that's our critical measurements. Let's make it happen. So we just did our cut at 1385. So now mark those out at 432. And obviously we need 4 of those, and we'll go and see if what we're planning is actually going to work here. Quick little pan around. Back into race cars on Monday. Looking forward to that. I actually really enjoyed working on that last week. So I've just marked down a screw line to attach that sheet. And it's a bit of a mongrel because I've got it sitting on the chassis with the cab kind of a bit in the way, but I can get in there with a right angle drill. So I think what I'll do is go ahead and take a chance. I'll prep the frame with a bit of Scotch-Brite and wax and grease remover, and I'll get some adhesive on there, and let's just have a crack and see if we can make a corner work like we think we're gonna. This will either go really well, or we're gonna get glue and shit everywhere and be really angry for the rest of the Sunday. Let's find out which one it is. Well, it's probably a real good thing we didn't have the camera rolling while I made that piece go around there then, because even though that's only 1mm aluminium, man, on that radius that fights like hell, and probably needed way more clamps ready to rock and roll, even though I did have a few set up. But we pulled it off without doing any damage, and it's glued and screwed on there. All those tech screws will obviously come out. There'll be huck rivets going in those holes, you know, so it sort of has that sleeper look. But let's have a look, because that took some doing. Alright, so we've got our corner piece on there. It does distort around the screws a little bit, but that's like dead set, no different to like any sleeper cab that you'll find on a Kenworth or anything like that, where the rivets are, the aluminium sheet is pulled around there. I think the vertical one near the doorway there will probably get like a little 90-degree sort of angle put there to just sort of deflect a bit of water and things like that away from the door hinge anyway. But yeah, like I said, we got it done. I'm relatively happy with it. I'm never happy with anything, but I'm relatively happy with it. And yeah, I think that's all it really needs to be. We've got our huge 6-inch exhaust runs up there, so by the time everything's on and everything's one colour and not shiny aluminium, I think everything will work out pretty good. I do think though, if those corners could be rolled so that they just sat on there, you know, without any tension left in the panel, that would definitely be way easier. But I think the trick for the next one is going to get a whole heap of plastic clamps, those squeeze together clamps that sort of self-lock, and just edge around, inch by inch around that radius before I go sort of banging any screws in, because what I had to do was on the bottom of the sheet I had to pull the screws out and just drill the holes in the sheet like one size bigger, so the sheet could just relax a little bit between the fasteners, and yeah, that made it lay out a lot nicer. But yeah, anyway, I think we did it, and I think we can do it better on the next 3, and that's what hot rodding's all about, learning as we go. And it doesn't matter whether it's been a year or 30 years, after 30 I'm still learning every day. Anyway, that's going to wrap up this one. Once again, I know my videos jump around a hell of a lot, but I would love to just work on one of my cars straight through, you know, beginning to end and stuff like that. But even on my builds that I do for myself, you know, and some that I sell and things like that, you're looking at, you know, 4 years to 5 years of building to pull these cars off. So thanks for watching me jump around from project to project. Video last week got a whole heap more attention, so that was awesome. One of the shorts we did on the race car during the week had something like 1,600 or 1,800 views or something like that. So really appreciate everyone that checked that out. If you could leave a comment. Comments are really what kicks, you know, YouTube algorithm, you know, kicks it up and gets it going. So if you can leave a comment and subscribe if you haven't already, and everyone that has, thanks heaps, I really appreciate it. And you know, we can do some more things like huge diesel motors jammed into old Chevs. Take it easy, enjoy the rest of your week.